and thank you very much for having us here today. What we're doing is, this is around our an approval for the adoption of our progressive implementation plan for implementing the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water. This is a statutory requirement that we need to be putting through before we get this going. One of the things that I'd like to also say is thank you very much for your involvement in this process, because as you see, what we're doing is well, actually, first of all, I'll introduce the people. Myself, Greg Holland, Manager of Natural Environment Strategy, and I have Andrew Sholland beside me, and he's the Program Manager for the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water. But, what we're doing here is, as you can see, like a decade-long process, and we're relatively at the beginning of it, and working across the organisation and across the council family from an operational asset perspective through into a consenting side of things, and working with mana whenua and community is vital to have this process achieved. We will be coming back to you periodically through this process to seek sort of advice and clarification as we go through. So having your engagement in this process is really important for us, so thank you very much. So I'm just going to hand across to Andrew Solomon. He's going to provide a few updates and a few points that he wants to clarify into this process. So thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Greg. Morning, councillors. So as Greg said just now, the paper seeks approval to publicly notify a progressive implementation program. Now, that is a requirement of the National Policy Statement, so it's a regulatory requirement. A progressive implementation program is required where the council decides that it's not possible to fully implement the National Policy Statement by the end of this year. Now, to fully implement the National Policy Statement, we would need to have changed all our plans to introduce objectives and limits for all the freshwater bodies around the region. That's a big task, and it's not feasible to do that given where we're at in our planning cycle. This was a decision that the council took also in 2012, that it was not possible. We've been required to review the progressive implementation plan following changes to the National Policy Framework in 2014, and so we're just saying again it's not possible to fully implement this by the end of 2015. Now, the government expected that, and it gave councils up to potentially 2030 to do that. So there's a recognition that it is going to take a period of time. We don't want to rush it either. This is something that we need to work through with our communities. There's broad implications of setting limits for freshwater. So the format that we've adopted for this progressive implementation plan that we're proposing is based on the one the Waikato Regional Council put forward. Now, they adopted theirs in October of this year. Northland, just so you know what your neighbours are doing, Northland is set to adopt theirs shortly as well. What we've proposed gives a high-level indication of the time frames that we would be updating our plans to make them consistent with the National Policy Statement. And as Greg said before, it's a program that's going to run for about 9 or 10 years. And what we're doing is we're aligning our work with the rolling review of the Auckland Unitary Plan, which will create windows of opportunity to change plan provisions to introduce freshwater objectives and limits. By aligning ourselves with that rolling review of the Auckland Unitary Plan, it allows us to make those changes in a timely and efficient way. We've had I'm reminded of the phrase, the second mouse gets the cheese. Auckland Council's been busy in the last little while with its amalgamation and its unitary planning process. And we've got the opportunity now to look on and see what other regional councils have been doing. Implementing the National Policy Statement is a very resource-intensive process, and what we need to do is, what we're suggesting through this progressive implementation plan is making sure that we take advantage of the work that the council is doing across its various units, the work that Auckland Transport is doing, Watercare is doing, the Unitary Plan team is doing, and we just align what we're doing as much as possible. So this program is largely about horizontal integration, and we're seeking to take and agile, if you're familiar with the management framework of agile management, or it's an adaptive approach to working through the national policy statement. So what that means is the exact schedule and precise location of plan changes isn't known yet. What we can do is we can signal the general areas where we're going to begin our work, and we're suggesting that we begin the process by collaborating with local boards, with mana whenua, with stakeholders across the various parts of the Auckland Council in a number of targeted areas. And you'll see, if you look at figure 3 on page 23 of the paper, you'll see that we've identified 4 targeted areas to start with, broadly in the central, west, north and south area. And we've suggested that an immediate focus in terms of priority is probably in the south, given the degree of development pressure that we're facing. Now, this is a first tranche of effort in our progressive implementation program. And once we've got this up and running, and we're getting that horizontal integration and understanding how we should engage effectively with our communities, understanding the pressures that are being brought to bear on those water bodies, and opportunities for management, that we will broaden this out in a series of successive phases. So over that 9-year period, 9 to 10-year period, we will implement plan changes across the entire region. What we're also saying is it's proven, we've spent a couple of years now looking at the national policy framework and understanding it technically and what it means in an Auckland context. And we're getting a lot of, through that process, we've had a lot of feedback that suggests that different communities around the region have got very different needs. To give you an example, in an urban environment, a highly urbanised urban environment, where you've got a fully engineered hydrology, where you've got a lot of stormwater and wastewater networks in the ground, you've got a lot of land is already developed. There are potentially very few management options. You might already have an awful lot of investment committed and in train. There are fewer opportunities for you to potentially engage openly and collaboratively with the community, saying, here are all the options that you could take, because many options are already locked down. So what we wouldn't want to do is overpromise and underdeliver in terms of the degree of community engagement possible in a situation like that. In other instances, perhaps when you're in a rural area where there are more opportunities for different management options, it would make a lot of sense to collaborate more openly. Now, what we're saying is, rather than prejudge exactly how we're going to engage with communities or what frameworks we're going to use, what we would like to do is begin by engaging in this, what's called a catchment accounting phase. That is, again, also required by the National Policy Statement. It's a bit of jargon, and what it basically means is figuring out where the sources of contaminants are, how they're changing over time, who's taking water, when and where, what management options are in place, what networks, what engagement do you already have in place with communities, all those kinds of things, understanding the current state of freshwater pressures, all those things. As we go through that process, we'll build relationships and understand a little bit more about how we need to engage with those communities. And we will work with them to provide advice back to you. And that's what Greg was saying at the start, is we're going to need a lot of advice and engagement from you as we go through this, because it's quite a democratic process, the freshwater framework. It requires a lot of kind of innovative ways of engaging with the community, and we're going to need a lot of direction as we go. So just signalling that we'll be in touch with you periodically to seek advice, to seek decisions on advice about how to take in particular parts of the region the knowledge that we're gathering and then actually turn it into statutory planning frameworks and limits. I'll also note as well that we're required to report annually on progress against the Progressive Implementation Plan. So in addition to coming back to you and giving you progress updates as we go and getting your direction on how you'd like us to engage in particular areas, we will be reporting annually on our performance. And as well as that, the National Policy Statement requires us to make sure that all the monitoring data that we have is publicly available in a digestible form. So we're working with the Research, Investigation and Monitoring Unit about how we can make that transparently available to the community as we go. And there's a range of options for that. I think the last point that I'll leave you with is I mentioned that this is a program about horizontal integration. So we are working hard to across the council family to line everybody up. But it also involves, by necessity, a lot of engagement with mana whenua. Now, what we've been doing is trying to work with the Kaitiaki Managers Forum, as well as the Governance Forum, and that I think the Watercare has set up. Yep. And also been trying to engage with Te Waka Angamua about how we design a framework for engaging with mana whenua in a way that respects our treaty partnership. So what we're suggesting is a three-tier approach. So the program has got three elements. There's an executive steering group, which is kind of governance and strategy making. There's an operational cross-council group, and there's targeted areas and engagement on the ground. And we've got a kind of a generic framework for engaging with mana whenua at those three tiers. And what we're wanting to do is continue to work with mana whenua over the next few months in the startup phase to just refine that as we go. We're doing a full review of our program's startup phase early next year, and we'll report back to you after that with any advice about tweaks or changes to that approach.
Thank you. That's excellent. Councillor Webster, you got a question?
Just a couple of questions, and thank you for this. I don't see any mention in here of the Integrated Kaipara Harbour Management Group, who's done a lot of work in the catchment of Kaipara. So we don't want to be reinventing the wheel, and also the Maharangi Action Plan. So those are two areas that there's a lot of work has been done, looking at those two catchments. So hopefully that's what you'll be doing.
Yes, so through the chair, yes, absolutely. And as Andrew pointed out, what we're trying to do is work with those existing groups. So it's identifying those, and we do know about both of those, and understanding what it is that they bring and that we can lock in and start to build the process. So it's not about creating any new institutional structures within the organisation that will be resource heavy, etc. It's using what's already there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. The first one is, how does this process that we're going to go through, how does that align to D1 of NPSO OF?
D1.
Tangata whenua.
Oh, sorry.
Kaupapa.
I don't have a copy of it in front of me, but having worked with the Land and Water Forum on this, the framework that influenced the design of those policies was based on Te Mana o Te Wai. Now, in Auckland, I think there's a little bit more of a focus on Māori rather than mana in terms of the water bodies. As I said, what we're really keen to avoid is prescribing a centralised approach to engagement with mana whenua that doesn't work for mana whenua or that's clunky. So we're totally aware that mana whenua need to be involved both at the flax roots in terms of what, the marae and hapu level about what people are actually wanting in terms of engaging in their water body, but also at that kind of generalised level about the general approach. So we're stepping gently into this, and we're wanting to design a system that works at multiple levels. I I think someone just put the
Yeah.
NPS here.
And if I could sort of add to that through the chair, we don't want to, in the spirit of this process, we don't want to predetermine anything with any rigid structures around it.